What could be done to prevent mass shootings? Story 1. Paying attention and actually doing something when there's a threat. Just look at the shooting by the 6-year-old a few weeks ago. His teacher, the victim, has retained a lawyer because there were multiple times that day where the kid was reported to have a gun and administration just kept blowing it off. There were half a dozen times just that day that the incident could have been prevented, not to mention all the red flags on previous days. Story 2. A lot of these mass shooters aren't just coming out of nowhere. According to this study, a solid majority of mass shooting were part of domestic violence, or the shooters had a history of domestic violence. Not going to spend all night digging into this, but I wouldn't be surprised if mass shooters are likely to have history of other violent or otherwise antisocial, stalking, for example, crimes and behaviors. Mass shooting isn't generally the start. It's an escalation. And I think it's a pretty good indication that we really need to handle domestic violence and other such crimes a lot better, if not for how fucked up it already is, then to stop it from escalating into something worse. Story 3. Make therapy more easily accessible for people who are middle or lower class, and actually take mental health and bullying seriously, instead of falsely advocating for it and brushing it off when people need serious mental help. Edit. I've accidentally left out another point I meant to make. I thought I'd share it upon remembering it. Recognize signs when someone is going to be a threat to themselves or other people and do something about it. It's important to note when someone is planning to hurt themselves or other people. Story 4. Social safety nets, less prison industrial complex, less school-to-prison pipeline, less glorification and less strength of the military, healthcare for all, paid parental leave, high minimum number of vacation days per year, heavily restricted gun access, smaller class sizes, fewer after-school activities, more intergenerational households, etc. Now choose the causative factor. Story 5. People need to have real, honest conversations with their loved ones and friends when the red flags go flying. Many of these shootings are not random, and the warning signs were present. Help that woman escape her abuser. Tell your brother to grow the fuck up and stop being abusive. Take your son's firearms when you know they are an abusive alcoholic, etc. Most of these people don't live in isolation, and people turn a blind eye because they feel it's not their problem or place to insert themselves. Be brave and speak up. It could save someone's life. Story 6. Stop turning shooters into celebrities in the media. Edit. Some people are confused. Not making them celebrities doesn't mean talking about mass shootings. Just not plastering their names and faces everywhere. I'm British. I don't know what's best for Americans as well as they do. But here's some thoughts. I don't think you can copy-paste UK policy to the US. It's like changing someone's intrinsic identity. Take Iran, for example. One of the lowest alcohol mortality rates. Imagine an Iranian saying to a British person, "Why don't you just ban alcohol? It causes so much death. We banned it, and our rate of mortality due to alcohol is one of the lowest in the world." You'd say something like, "Why should I give up something I enjoy and is part of my culture because a few bad apples take it too far?" From talking to them, Americans view guns the same way. Why does someone else doing wrong with guns have any bearing on me who's just using it for fun, protection? I'd say a mix is gun regulations and mental health support, and not making martyrs of shooters has the best chance. Story 7. I think take bullying seriously is way more complicated than it sounds. People, at least in the US, hate the idea of government interfering in any way whatsoever with their kids. It's a safe bet that most bullies have terrible home lives, but there's not much the government can do about that. Our adoption foster system is already severely overwhelmed, and a lot of abuse happens to kids in that system as well, so taking kids away from their families wouldn't really help. That being said, we could build stronger social safety nets, give more funding to public education systems, increase wages, provide universal health care, increase availability/access to birth control, etc. All of those things would reduce stress significantly for all Americans and hopefully prevent more people from having unwanted children. Unfortunately, Republicans vehemently oppose all of these things, and nearly half of all Americans don't bother to vote. It's even worse in local elections, which ironically affect people more than the general election. If we want change, we have to vote, and we have to vote blue. Even if Democrats aren't perfect, they still care about these issues and don't actively oppose them like Republicans do. Story 8. I'm from Denmark, and while it might not hold true for the US, I was surprised how different nationalities view domestic violence, specifically against their children. I used to study in a class with a bunch of different nationalities. There were a few French, a few Spanish, and a few from various Eastern European countries. All of the people I talked to had a much more liberal view of how to raise kids. Some with a smack here and there doesn't hurt. So we started talking details. Apparently, a few of them thought a smacking for everyday misbehavior was fine. I have never heard anyone my own age from Denmark say that smacking your children is ever okay. It's severely frowned upon as a completely unacceptable method to correct your children's behavior. I guess what I'm getting at is that you'll probably have less violence if it's very unacceptable in the culture. Story 9. When you look at the random mass shooters, I say random because I think that's what we are referring to, not gang violence, it seems to be consistent that these people are terminally online. I may be wrong about that, just what I pick up. Like, for starters, everything on the internet is insanely political, and not in a healthy way. If you really judge society by Reddit and Twitter, you'd think we are a ticking time bomb for a civil war between hyper-progressive authoritarian types and hyper-conservative authoritarian types. The internet quickly becomes a hateful place, and whether you're taking part in hate or feel you're the one being hated, I think someone who's already troubled could come away really believing that this is how people are now. This is not true. Most people are normal and just trying to get through their day. Now, at the same time, these random shooters seem to, not always, but typically be younger white men. When compared to the population, they are pretty big statistical outliers, so it's tough to really come up with a demographic answer to what's happening here. However, I don't think it can be ignored that white men also account for 70% of suicides in the United States, even though they are 31% of the population. Google search, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't really have any answers, but I think with the advent of the internet and other extremely stimulating material that can lead to someone being antisocial, mostly targeted at men, we have an issue of people becoming disassociated with the world around them. We can ban guns, but at the end of the day, we have a problem of people making the decision that they want to kill a ton of people, and we need to understand where this is coming from.